Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of And Action. I'm Tommy DiNucci. I'm here with my co-host, Mike Messier, and today we have a very, very special episode. It's the 10-year anniversary of my directorial debut, Self-Storage. We're going to get into it all. I can't believe it's been 10 years. God damn, I'm getting old. But I guess that's better than the opposite, right? The goal is to get old. If you don't get old, you're dead. So fuck, we made it this long. Here we are 10 years later. We're going to dive into self-storage. But before we do that, Mike, how the hell are you? What have you been up to? How was your feedback on our last episode? We did our last episode on the worst days of our filmmaking lives. How was the feedback?
The feedback that I got from Kim Kaling and others, Stephen Edwards, was pretty positive. People could relate to our stories. People understood, if you've ever been an actor trying to get somewhere, like your story about having a role kind of swiped from you because of circumstances beyond your control. Some of my stories, kind of even the Me Too type of movement stuff that I discussed last week. I think people like the stories. We try to tell them with some humor, but some of those stories are kind of semi-tragic because some of those situations were not that good. But I think we try to learn from those experiences. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah, I think it's always fun, that old line, misery loves company. I think sometimes it's good to talk out the less not so much the highlights of life. You got to mention your lowlights sometimes too, because it certainly makes the good times shine a little bit brighter. So that was last week's episode 11. You can check that out in the archives. But today, it's all about self-storage. Mike, self-storage is kind of one of those movies that really it takes me back to the very beginning. I mean, really, like before I had any kind of foothold in the business at all, before I had any kind of attachment, any kind of representation, this was very much the first screenplay I ever wrote. We're going to get into the whole history of it. Quick shout out to Stephen E. Quick shout out to Kim. What's up? Welcome to the show, our longtime listeners. It's good to have you with us. So self-storage, we got to really go back to, like I said, the very beginning. At the time, this is going back to probably, I would say 2009, 08, 09, somewhere in that general range. We're talking a while ago. Self-storage was a script that existed for a little while before it kind of, got made and came to fruition. But I was working with a local filmmaker at the time, and we've talked about this before on previous episodes. But about 10, 15 years ago, the big buzz was make a horror movie with one location, 10 characters, get it all done within that 90-page range, and you have a very sellable entity. And that's still a formula that works. I mean, no one's going to knock that formula today. But back then, they were really cranking out a lot of movies like that. So right away, I started kind of just cranking my gears in my head and thinking about the location first. It was actually one of those things where before I even told a story or thought of a concept, I just wanted to think of like, okay, one location, what's a cool location? And there was this self-storage facility that was off the highway, off Route 37, where I live in Cranston. And I used to kind of take this exit all the time, and I would see this storage facility, and particularly at night, it had this very kind of creepy and ominous look to it. It's just kind of lit, odd pools of light, and you'd see all these storage units. And I always just remember thinking, like, there's all these storage units, and for the most part, it's just a bunch of junk, and it's everybody's old crap that they moved one day, and it just that old couch that your aunt gave you it's left for dead or whatever. It's a lot of crap. But it makes you wonder, like, I bet you out of all those units, there must be just one or two fucked up items in one of those units. And I just started thinking about, like, what are some fucked up things that could be in there that could be the germ of a story? And that just kept developing and developing. And then basically we came up with the concept of self-storage from all those kind of notions of like, ooh, what could be in there? And I remember to this day, I wasn't really a big, I don't say I'm not a big party animal, but like I was never a big like go to the club guy.
Right.
Kind of like, I get like anxiety and like large crowds and like I don't really it's not my scene, man. Like I'm not
You're
saying
allergic to rubber stamps on your back of your hand.
yeah, I never wanted the whole bracelet that you can't take off or rip it off. I don't know, man. Like clubs were never my thing. Once in
Yeah,
a while I've had some fun, but it's
sure.
not my go-to weekly thing. So I remember a lot of
Right.
my friends would be going out a lot in Providence, and I remember one specific night where I didn't feel like going out, and I felt like working on this story, and I took a weird like late night drive to this self-storage facility at like, it was one of those things where I used to like stay up and get some work done, and I would actually meet up with my friends when they got out of the club. So I would like stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then my friend lived literally 2 blocks from me. I would go meet everyone for like the after party and hang out. So I remember like killing time before like 1 or 2 in the morning when all my friends get out of the club, and I'm at this self storage facility like a total weirdo, and I'm taking pictures and I'm seeing the different angles, and that's when it all kind of hit me like, man, like what if somebody ran some kind of clandestine body harvesting ring out of one of these self-storage facilities? Like, what if inside one of these units was a makeshift operating room where you could actually take people in the middle of the night and pull a kidney out and maybe sell it on the black market? So that was kind of like where I was going with this concept of illegal body
Well,
harvest all happening in plain sight.
let me ask you this, Tommy. Was this the era when shows like Storage Wars were getting started, or was this even a couple of years before that?
Believe it or not, this was like a couple years before it. By the time the
Oh,
movie got
fuck.
out, and by the time we
Yeah,
started like actually making the movie, Storage Wars was kind of a big thing. And I don't know, I could be wrong. I got to check. We'll look it up online eventually. But like Storage Wars may have been out, but it wasn't quite like the little buzz phenomena that it became for a little while. So the self storage world was very much a kind of an unplucked, unharvested creative space. So that night I kind of came up with the basic concept, and then from there I started writing, and it was one of those things where thankfully my friend Sam, shout out to my buddy Sam, you know we were both kind of young guys, not really working much, just doing the thing, probably ripping a bong a little bit more than we should be,
sure.
uh, and a lot of our days would be spent like watching kind of bad horror movies, or my friend Sam was fucking obsessed with CSI,
Hmm.
particularly the Vegas and the Miami one. So he would just like watch these goddamn shows, and it drove me fucking insane to the point where I finally said like, well, I feel like hanging out. I want to rip the bong, of course, but I don't want to watch these fucking shows anymore. I'm gonna bring my laptop to Sam's house. So I remember like riding shotgun was my buddy Sam on the couch watching CSI, and then I just have my laptop out and I'd be writing and I'd be coming up with, again, I had never written a screenplay before. I knew about, that's not entirely true in the sense where I've written like short kind of scripts for little films that I did in college. I had never written a feature script before. So I really just like took a shot at it. I kind of just
Right.
took a crack and started going, and it'd be funny because I'd be watching something in a movie that Sam was watching, and I'd maybe like pick and pull a little bit from the random shit that he was watching, and I'd occasionally be like, "Hey man, wouldn't it be cool if this happened and that happened?" And of course, as I'm writing, I'm developing the characters, particularly the main character, Jake, and they always say, like, write what you know. Well, I knew myself. And I tried to take a little page out of the Sylvester Stallone book where I said to myself, well, what did Stallone do that was kind of so impactful on his career? He wrote himself to be Rocky. And he was pretty adamant about staying in that spot and playing Rocky no matter what. I wasn't really quite sticking to my guns that hard, but I knew that I wanted to as an actor. Because keep in mind, guys, this is long before I'm not even close to being a director. I have no intentions of directing at this time. I'm trying to write a piece of material that could be a star vehicle for me, or something that I could put myself in and get people excited about. So I remember there's actually 2 characters in this script that I wrote potentially with myself in mind. One was the lead Jake, and the other was the secondary character Rip, where I said to myself, well, if I couldn't convince somebody to finance the film with me playing Jake, there's also this other cool, much smaller role that would probably make sense to just cast a local anyway. So I'll try to play that one. So, little hint, if you're writing, number one, there's nothing wrong with writing yourself a part in the movie if you're an actor and that's what you really want to do. Just make sure that it makes sense. And number two, if you're going to go ahead and write yourself that one part, write yourself a backup part too. So that way, like, if your heart gets set on playing the lead or whatever, but then it doesn't go your way, you get something else that you can fall back on, and you won't feel fucking shattered when they tell you you can't play the lead.
Let me jump in with something on that, Tommy. You know, sometimes people, when they do write a script, kind of like what you did, and they write themselves as the lead, they get very attached and married to that. But what in a potential situation where some high-end production company has the resources to get a star in that lead role that you wrote for yourself? In my opinion, sometimes it's better to give up that role. No disrespect to Sylvester Stallone in the Rocky story, because it's so hard to get a movie financed these days that it's better to have the movie made at all and have your name on the credit as a writer than what's that expression, cutting your nose off to spite your face type of thing.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. And that's exactly why I wrote Rip to be such a cool character. Again, like that's part of the tip. Write that second smaller character to be so cool that you're almost like, man, I kind of want to play that smaller role. You know, like make
Right.
that such a great character that like you're good either way. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Listen, it's okay to say that you want to play the lead in your movie, but never stand on ceremony to the point where, you know, Sylvester Stallone was a very unique situation. And let's face it, the business doesn't quite work the way that it did back then. You're talking 1975 when he was doing, you know, in pre-production for that movie. A long time ago, things have changed. So like Mike said, if you have an opportunity to make your movie and they kind of say, hey, look, we love your script, we want to make it, but you can't play the lead, gracefully bow and say, I understand, and cash your fucking check for the script and be on your way.
Right.
So basically, I had this script. I started developing it. I got it out into the world. And now I am in front of, I am able to get it in front of Chad Verdi. And that is where Chad Verdi acquires the script. And basically, I become gainfully employed for the first time in my life. And it was kind of a game changer in the sense where self-storage had been building a lot of buzz. You know, the concept was great. I want to back it up a little bit just to explain. Like people might say, like, well, how did it get in front of Chad's, you know, how did it get across Chad's desk, so to speak? Well, at the time, the filmmaker that I was working with was also working on some stuff with Chad. And the buzz for the script was just so big because, again, self-storage, like the one thing about it that it had going for it, the biggest strength was I could explain people the pitch in 1 or 2 sentences. And I'm going to do it now because it's good to show a little synopsis. Basically, like we said, self-storage is about a 24-hour self-storage facility in the middle of nowhere. The night watchman security guard is a goofy, dope stoner named Jake, and he uncovers this nefarious plot that his boss is actually running a black market body organ harvesting ring right under his nose at night. The main character, Jake, throws a party with his buddies, and all these young kids are ripe for the taking when there's an emergency order for a bunch of organs that comes in that night. So basically, that's the general premise, and there's more to it than that. But I was able to, like, in a couple TV guide sentences,
Right.
kind of quickly explain. And a lot of times, producers are they're quick thinkers. You know, they don't need. I don't want to say this in a gruff way, like they don't need all the information, but if they hear something that they like and it clicks, they don't need a lot of information. That's enough for them to go off of their instincts to say, oh, this is a story that I want to be a part of. So
They
pretty
want the
quickly,
elevator pitch, right? They want the elevator pitch, is what they call it, 30 seconds or less.
yeah, they don't have time to sit there and read a dozen scripts a day or even a dozen pieces of coverage a day. They want to just give me it in like a paragraph. Let me watch a 30-second trailer, whatever. So this movie kind of had that going for it, the ability to be told very quickly. So now Chad has it. He's acquired it. And I'm getting paid. And we don't like to talk about numbers too much on this show because it's really nobody's business except for myself and the IRS. But it's kind of cute and it's kind of funny. It was my first ever job. I got paid $500 a week for 40 weeks. And that's how the deal went. Basically, it was a thing where it was kind of cool because at the time, like, rather than like getting a big chunk of money all at once, because I was a young kid, I might have done something stupid with it. I had a job, you know, and I was like getting paid every week, and it was a nice thing. And I felt like, for lack of a better word, I felt like an adult. And for me
Sure.
to be making, I wasn't getting rich, but at the time, to me, that, $500 a week at the time, it felt I might as well get paid 10 grand a week for me and my expenses, what they were. So I felt great, man. This movie right off the bat gave me an incredible amount of confidence. And I never really intended on directing it. That's the kind of funny thing. It was in the mill. It was in Chad's mill. Keep in mind, Chad had just made Incubus, and he had just made Infected. And now there was talk of, okay, we're going to make another horror movie. So did I know it was going to be next in line? Not really. I wasn't really sure. And then, a little bit of time went by, and then basically I kind of get the nod, like, okay, we want to make this movie. We want to go ahead and kind of greenlight this thing. And, in the development process, I did kind of, as they say, like, get by with a little help from my friends. Keep in mind, I was a first-time director. I was a first-time screenwriter. So I had like a solid concept, but there was a little bit of like fine tuning and polishing that it kind of lacked. So shout out to Glenn Ciano. He, helped me out on the draft and gave me some notes. And Glenn's always been like a big brother in the business. And Glenn directed Incubus and gets a story credit on the concept. And along with that was the writer of Incubus, Carl Dupree, who also wrote Detroit Rock City, which we talked a little bit about him on some past episodes. So Carl's this veteran writer, really funny guy, really cool guy. And I remember like him agreeing to help me. He was like, I think he ended up getting an executive producer credit on the movie, but he didn't want any money. He didn't want anything like that. He was just like, no, man, like, and I had helped him on Incubus a little bit, little
Right.
unknown facts. Like I'd helped him in the writing room very early on. I don't even think it was called Incubus at the time. I think the movie was still called like Night Shift or something weird like that. But anyway, Carl kind of, I don't want to say he felt like he owed me a favor, but he wanted to help me, to be honest. He wanted to help. So I remember here on the porch where I broadcast all my shows from, it's my office. It's where I've written all my screenplays. And any one of my friends knows that the porch is like almost like a part of like my folklore. It's like it's a venue in a way.
It's an extension.
It's an extension of myself. So I had Carl to the porch and didn't want any money. He just said he wants snacks. He said, make sure you have plenty of snacks. And I said, okay. So I went fucking nuts. I probably went to, CVS or the grocery store. I probably spent $50 on, I had everything. M&Ms, cookies, granola bars, fucking cheese crackers, like Skittles, any kind of fucking snack you can imagine. I had like laid out for him like a buffet. And he came in and he was like, wow, look at all this. And he got to snacking and we got to talking and started working on the script. And, again, this is a guy who's sold scripts to like fucking major studios.
Yeah, I want to say Carl. I was actually in a writers group for years with Carl Dupree, the writers of Wicked, and he is a fun guy, great guy. He also wrote 2 of the Hellraiser sequels, which I don't think a lot of people know. He's the writer of 2 of the movies.
For that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking Hellraiser. That's a major horror franchise.
Big deal, yeah. And he wrote 2 of them. And I remember buying a Blu-ray disc that had like 4 of the movies on it and 4 of the Hellraiser sequels and trying to figure out if Carl had written the ones that I bought. And I think they did. So, yeah, he's a good guy.
You were like, you may or may not have written this one, but either way, I'd like to get your autograph on that.
Yeah.
Steven makes a fun comment here. See if he will still take those snacks. I feel like now he'd probably want a little bit more than just the snacks. I don't know. Probably have to, maybe like a monthly supply of snacks at least.
He's not a heavy set guy either. I'm a little surprised that food was so important.
No, he's in good shape. Yeah, Carl's in good shape. He just, it was almost like when a band goes to a venue and they have like a rider, like make sure you got this, that, and, 1,000 brown M&Ms or whatever. He just wanted snacks. Yeah, the green M&Ms, exactly. So speaking of green, the movie gets greenlit to my fucking shock. Here I am in the summer of, I want to say like, it's probably like the spring of 2011. And basically Chad tells me that he wants to make the movie. And not only does he tell me that he wants to make the movie, but we start talking about a potential director. And then he kind of asks me / I say at the same time, again, like sometimes in life we have these weird moments, weird opportunities, where we just kind of like it's almost a defense mechanism, but we agree that we lay claim to being able to do something that we may or may not be 100% sure that we can actually do. But at the same time, if we don't take a fucking shot, you ain't gonna live your life sitting on the fucking bench, that's for sure. So basically, Chad and I, as we're having this directorial conversation, I kind of just come out and I was like, I think I could direct this. Because keep in mind, I'm coming off of I had just directed some reshoots for a movie Infected. I really kind of crushed that. I did it, in a very short period of time, and I didn't cost a lot of money budget wise. So I think that gave a little bit of confidence in Chad that I could actually do this. And then before you know it, like a week later, like the movie's pretty much greenlit, and I'm in line to direct. And the kind of elephant in the room is, okay, well, this Jake character, this main character, Jake, like, I still want to play that part. And, Chad asked me, do you think you can do it? Do you think it'll take away from your work and, behind the camera if you're in front of the camera? And of course, like a stubborn bastard, I say, absolutely not. I can handle that. Of course, it's my first time doing it. Why wouldn't I be able to handle it? So I agree to do it. I'm going to direct. And somehow, to my shock, I remember having a call with one of Chad's close producing partners at the time. And they're saying things, it's like music to my ears. Like, okay, well, we can build a cast around Tommy. Tommy will play Jake, and we'll build up a cast around him. And as a actor who's a quote no name wanting to play a big role, to have producers use the terminology, we'll quote build a cast around him. That's like fucking music. That's literally music to your ears. That's the dream scenario.
Emotional food for your creative soul, right?
Yeah, and it's to the point where I'm almost like, somebody fucking throw a bucket of water on my head. Am I dreaming right now? Like, look, what the fuck's going on here? Is this a joke? Am I gonna wake up? They're gonna be like, that was funny, Tommy. Remember we thought you were gonna play the lead and direct your movie? And like, no, Ashton Kutcher, to use a dated reference from the era, Ashton Kutcher was nowhere to be found. This wasn't fucking Punked. And I'm actually like making this movie. So casting came next, and Chad and I basically decided to like divide and conquer on the casting front, meaning Chad would cast the major roles, the names, the leads, and I would go ahead and cast these are still major roles, but parts that probably warrant a local actor, not necessarily a Hollywood talent or whatever you want to call it. So the names start coming in, and you can go back to the archives and check out our Eric Roberts episode. We had a great time back on episode 6 talking all about everything that is Eric Roberts and my time with him on the set of Self Storage. So I'll kind of breeze through the Eric portion of this, but basically Eric Roberts was brought on to be the lead, the main character, the sick motherfucker who's running this black market organ harvesting ring right underneath everyone's nose in the heart of his own self-storage facility. So this is a great role for Eric. Just to be brief with it, he loved the fact that self-storage kind of has an element of dark comedy to it. If you watch it, there's some humor sprinkled in there. And he loved the fact that the character Walter had a lot of humor. Also, quick side note, Walter was the name of my cat at the time, who was a really big, badass cat. And shout out to Walter. We miss him. He's no longer with us. But Walter was a great character, and Eric was fucking in both feet, excited to be a part of the movie. The next couple pieces are kind of interesting. Chad took a page out of his Incubus casting book, where he brought in a horror icon, Robert Englund, to play Incubus. This time, he was going to bring in another incredibly recognizable person in the horror genre, and that was Michael Berryman. Michael Berryman's been in a lot of classic movies of that genre. The Hills Have Eyes, The Devil's Rejects, and he's also in. How about he's in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, like one of the greatest films of all time, you could argue. So Berryman's been in the business. Like, to me, again, quick movie geek sidebar. If you're in a movie like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that's like literally like you're a part of cinematic history, like forever. Like, you were right there next to Jack Nicholson while he was like carving up one of the most incredible performances of all time. Like, it's just, to me, on a side note, it's just cool to think of that. So basically, we had Michael Berryman in. He was also in Weird Science. Really cool piece that horror fans would notice and kind of be drawn to. And then finally, like with the outside of the box casting, and I got to piece my memories together, but I want to say Jonathan, I'm talking about Jonathan Silverman here. And I think he had the same manager as either Eric or Michael. That was kind of the connection. You know, you'll see that in casting, guys. That happens a lot. It's almost like shopping, you know, or going to
Right.
like an antiques vendor. You know, they might be like, well, I have this piece that you're interested in. Are there any of my other pieces that I have that you might like? And if you get both of these pieces, we might be able to work out a little deal together.
Right.
So it's like, you know, you get a little more for your money if you get both of these kind of thing. So
Buy one, get one half off or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
deal. So Jonathan Silverman comes in, and you know, to talk about Jonathan Silverman for a minute, you know, anyone who has a sibling, a brother, sister, whatever, they have these movies that we kind of like watch over and over and over again as kids growing up. You know, everybody's got those handful of movies that were heavy in the rotation as a kid. For me and my sister, Weekend at Bernie's was heavy in the fucking rotation. We probably watched that movie, no joke, 100 times growing up. You know, it was just like you get the old VHS tape, you pop it in. And also, Mike, I don't know if you remember this, but like I feel like Weekend at Bernie's was just like on TV at any given time.
USA Network.
Like from like 1990 to 1997. I feel
Right.
like at any given day you could fucking flip on the TV and it'd be on some cable or some HBO channel or so. It was just like
Movies for guys that love movies.
it was just a heavily played movie back in the day.
Right.
So I grew up loving Jonathan Silverman. So the fact that he was in this movie and he couldn't have been cooler and nicer, and he only came in, I think he worked 1 or 2 days, maybe 2 days. And he was just fucking terrific. And he was one of the nicest guys and so easy to work with. And what he liked about this movie was, you know, Jonathan Silverman's usually known to play like kind of a, I don't want to say geek, but just certainly not like a badass kind of guy or like he's never, very rarely plays like a killer or a tough
He's a
guy.
lovable everyman, like a lovable underdog type of guy, normal
Yeah.
guy. Brighton
Yeah.
Beach Memoirs is a great movie that he's in, and he was in that. His first gig was this TV sitcom, Give Me a Break, where he played the boyfriend of one of the three sisters on that show. He's been around for a while.
He's traditionally played, but he traditionally plays characters that you want to get behind.
Right.
That you know, you almost, I don't say you feel bad for them, but certainly not the guy toting the gun, selling drugs.
Vulnerable.
Plays vulnerable characters. Quite the opposite in this one. He plays basically kind of like this gun-toting body part vendor. You know, like he's the guy who purchases the organs that the Eric Roberts character carves up and dissects. So he's basically the connect on the other end who actually buys the organs. So it was kind of a dark and fucked up role. So we brought him in, and you know, next thing is my job. You know, those are the three anchored kind of roles. Next, my job is to cast the rest of the movie. So I went with my go-to, one of my friends, Kevin DeCristofano, who I've worked with many times. We had talked about him in the past. He worked with me on Incubus. He's co-written Saving Christmas, which is a Christmas movie that I did. Very talented guy. I always kind of believed in him as a comedian, as a writer, as an actor. So it made perfect sense that he was going to play this character called Hamilton. And it's kind of funny because Hamilton, one of my favorite moments in this movie is he gets this like awful knee replacement, and he just screams like such a banshee. His scream was so good actually that I remember casting him in Vault because there's a character that gets shot in the leg and he screams from it. I was like, oh, I got the perfect guy who could scream on camera. Let me tell you, Kevin will fucking nail this, and he did.
Right.
So that's Kevin. It's fun to work with him on this one. Always nice to be in the trenches with a bro. And then, you know, we're moving on to what I call the Hamlet Crew. And you're probably going to say, Tommy, what the fuck does Hamlet have to do with self-storage? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. I was doing work for the GAM Theater, and I was in a play directed by Fred Sullivan. Hamlet. And at the time, I'll be honest with you, I had never done a lot of theater productions, so I never really met a lot of theater people. And uh, the theater's a weird thing, man. Like some theaters, you go into it, and like everyone can be a little funny, especially to a movie guy. At first when I got in there was a little bit of noses in the air to me, like who's this movie actor guy? Who's this guy? Like almost like you don't belong in the theater kind of thing. But there were a
Right.
few people that like really embraced me and like took me kind of under their wing because I didn't know shit about the theater. Like I didn't like, oh, what do? We put our stuff down here. We just wait and they'll call us out there when it's our time to go out. Like how the fuck does this work? I'm used to just being on movie sets. So it was an eye-opening experience. I learned a lot and I met a lot of cool people. And a few of those cool people were Gillian Williams was a young actor who was playing Ophelia at the time, which anyone who knows Hamlet knows that Ophelia is a role where you really got to bring it. And she has this like incredible drowning scene. It's very emotional. And I remember Gillian just like, again, the theater is not always the most, how can I say this by being nice? You don't have all the frills of a movie, in terms of like all these people coddling you and making sure that you look
Right.
good, look right, and then sending you on your way. You got to kind of manage your own shit. So I remember just recognizing Gillian and seeing that she would go out on stage, have this like total crazy flip out scene, and then come backstage and like be smiling and chill and like do all of her own makeup, do all of her own kind of wardrobe. I just saw her as a person who was like sharp, on their game, talented, but also had the ability to kind of like flip the switch, turn it off, and do her, manage. So she kind of like went off on my radar as a person that might be right to play the lead female in this movie. And then there was Ben Gracia, who was just awesome and funny, and we're still friends to this day. And we kind of caught up over playing, talking about football and talking about video games and wrestling and all these things that I didn't think theater people would be into. And Ben was again just we became really quick friends, fast friends. And there was this like party animal character, that Rip character that I talked about. That was the character that I actually potentially wrote as my backup plan. He was perfect for that. Then there was Mark Mancini, who basically played. Mark had this really sensitive face. He had the kind of face that like you'd feel for. You want
Right.
to get behind him. When I'm casting, those are the kind of things that like I look for. I look for like you hate to say this, but because you don't want to judge people, but some people's faces just say certain things to me. Like some people have a very vulnerable look to their eyes or whatever. They might not be vulnerable. They're probably not. But it's just when I
Right.
see them, the artist in me, how can I say this without sounding weird? But it's almost like I see people as like almost like different paints in a paint set. And it's like, ooh, that would be cool to paint with for this scene because
Yeah, your palette.
yeah, like that emotional ability to like draw emotions just out of your eyes, like how Mark can do it. And there was a character that was particularly vulnerable quite a bit in the film, and I was like, he'd be perfect for that. And it wasn't just talent in front of the camera. There was Helen Brennan, who was a costumer working at the theater at the time, who, keep in mind, guys, I didn't know anybody. And Chad was very much believed in me to kind of like hire all these people that would help us make this movie. So Helen Brennan was a costumer who, again, like I said, like the theater's no frills. You have like
Right.
a wardrobe designer who designs. You have a costume designer who designs everything, and then you might have a person like Helen who is actually there every night, making sure that at least everyone's clothes are set up and where they should be for for the run. And then there were a couple of other key players, Vanessa Lee, who had been in a couple of horror movies at the time. I brought her in, and Lauren Bell. We were able to get through a casting call. She played Jess, this kind of party character, and crushed it. Um, and it's kind of one of those things where like the final piece of casting that I thought was really cool uh, was, well, actually, before we get into this, I should talk about Nick Principe real quick,
Oh,
because Nick
sure.
Principe is a name that you're going to hear a lot on the show, and you have heard in the past a lot. Nick is a stuntman. He's a stunt coordinator. He's an actor, obviously. He's a writer, very talented, can kind of do just about anything involving movies. He's worked in the art department on, union projects. He's done it all.
What's his character? Chrome Skull? Was that
He's
his character?
an iconic character, Chrome Skull, in the movie Laid to Rest 1 and 2, which is a pretty big horror franchise. So Nick's done it all, and it's kind of funny how Nick and I met each other. We met through this like booking agent who does booking for conventions, and I was starting to do a couple bookings, and Nick had been a veteran, and the guy's like, "Oh, you guys are both from Rhode Island. You should talk. I think Nick might have some avenues to financing." So this is before I was even trying to make self-storage with anyone. This is like before Chad even acquired it. I was just like seeing if there's any money out there for it. So I get on the call with Nick and this other guy, and we're talking for like literally 20, 30 minutes. And I give him the pitch. I tell him everything about the movie. We're having this deep conversation. And then finally Nick like laughs, and I'm like, "What's this guy fucking laughing about?" He goes, "Guys, I mean, this sounds cool, but like I have no avenue to financing. I don't know where you got that. I'm like a stunt coordinator. I'm a actor. I'm a writer. I don't know where you got that. I'd be into finance." So then I was like, "This is a fucking dead end." But I remember just like liking the guy, and I remember saying like, "Well, hey, I'll tell you what, man. If I'm ever able to get this going, it's in Rhode Island. I'll give you a call," kind of thing.
Sure.
So I give Nick a call because I actually am able to get it going, and he happens to be in town, and we meet and we start working on stuff, and it's like out of Step Brothers. It was like, it was like, "Should we be best friends?" It's like, "Yes, let's be best friends." Like right away we just hit it off. We had a lot of the same interests, and basically we just got to work on all the stunts and everything else. And we're going to talk a lot about John Del Ponte in a minute, but me, John Del Ponte, and Nick Principe were like thick as thieves on that movie, and really kind of like the driving force to like actually getting shit done on the ground. But Nick's a great guy, and I think he's the only actor. I don't know if this trivia question is ever going to come up on anything, but he's the only actor that's been in every one of my movies. Like every single one of my movies, Nick's found a way in there. And it's not because he's my friend and I'm doing him a favor. It's because every time he adds some kind of value to the movie, whether it's behind the scenes as a coordinator, whether he's in front of the camera. And we even wrote Johnny and Clyde together all these years later. So it's kind of a pretty cool story when you think about it.
He was
The
a
next,
stuntman for me in a Dan Hunter movie a couple of years ago too.
yes, he's worked with Dan a couple times. He's kind of done it all.
Yes.
So next we're going to talk about, this is kind of fun to round out the cast. I remember I was on set, and casting's a weird thing. Like sometimes people would be shocked as to like sometimes roles are literally cast like the day before they're shot sometimes, just because there's so many fucking balls moving and plates spinning. It's just like, oh shit, we still got to cast that part. So there was this part for like a guy that basically like opens the movie, and it's like kind of like the early kill in the movie that sets us up. And I have David Gear on set, who David Gear is helping me make the movie. He's on as a producer, and he's also plays a part in the movie as one of Jonathan Silverman's sort of like underlings in this body harvesting ring. Now everybody knows I'm a huge wrestling fan. If you don't, now you know. And David tells me, we're talking about casting this part, and he tells me, "Oh, I could get Tommy Dreamer to be in that part." And I like, my head turns, and I'm like, "Tommy Dreamer? Like the ECW Tommy Dreamer?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm buddies with him." I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here." I'm like, "Yes, if we can get Tommy Dreamer in this movie, like, are you kidding me? Like, is he going to do it? Like, how much is that going to cost?" Obviously, like the producer hat comes on, and I'm like, "How can we even afford that? Like, what's going to happen?" "No, no, no, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. Hang on, actually." And he takes his phone out. He goes off into the parking lot, says a couple things, and he returns with the phone. He's like, "Do you want to talk to him?" I'm like, "That's Tommy Dreamer right now?" I'm like, "Hell yeah." And I pick up the phone, and there I am, like having a conversation with somebody that when I was 14 years old, I was like cheering my little head off and yelling at for, taking chair shots to the head and getting excited about. Now I'm on the phone
Power
with him,
driving Beulah McGillicuddy and beating up Raven in a cage match. Yeah.
taking Singapore cane shots to the back. And now I'm talking to him on the phone, telling him about this part, explaining to
Yeah.
him the part and like how it's really important. It kicks off the movie. And wouldn't you know, Tommy Dreamer literally like got in his car the next night or next afternoon and drove from think he lives in Yonkers. Drove from Yonkers, New York to Rhode Island and was part of the movie. And that next night, literally the next fucking night, we were on the phone. The next night, he's in town working on the movie. And little side note, he brings a student of his who he's worked with in the past, who's just getting into the wrestling business now. She had just been had a little stint in TNA, and her name is Thea Trinidad, and now we know her better as Zelina Vega. And if you don't know pro wrestling, Zelina Vega, aka Thea Trinidad, is pretty much a megastar in the wrestling world. I mean, she's a
Zelina Vega. Queen.
yeah,
She's a
I'm
queen.
sorry, yes. Queen Zelina Vega. She has just exploded, and I can't tell you how I'm not proud of her because I didn't do anything. I'm proud for her and the
Sure.
accomplishments that she's made, because I remember when she was kind of just getting started, and just, the wrestling business is a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. It's a vicious industry. It's both physically and mentally draining, and it takes its toll on you. So anyone who can excel in that world, we give an and action salute. Very proud of what Thea Trinidad has done. And she's so cool, man. I mean, like, I'm not trying to, like, I sound like a super mark, but like, to this day, like, we worked on this movie together years ago, and of course she was in Army of the Damned too, but like, to this day, like, once in a while, like, Zelina and I will check in and say what's up. And I'm not talking about like, we're not hanging out and getting dinner or anything, but like, it's nice to know that, like, all these years later and all this fame that she's achieved, she still, recognizes where she started, and we'll shoot a text out and say what's up and say, hey, how you doing, kind of thing. So awesome person, and we love seeing that kind of success. So there she was on, I'm pretty sure it had to be her first ever movie set. And the funny thing is, it's kind of cool. Like, again, she's this big star now. I don't even think she says a line in Self Storage. She's pretty much just like what you'd call a featured background actor. So little Easter egg for you wrestling fans. Go take a look at Self Storage, and if you can find where Zelina Vega is, if you're able to track her down, reach out, say what's up, take a screenshot, and drop it down in the comments. And if you do, I will send you an autograph Self Storage item of some kind. There's a little game for you. Screenshot, find Zelina Vega in Self Storage, screenshot it. I will send you some kind of autographed Self Storage memorabilia. We'll figure it out. But moving on, talk pretty much. I got to refer to my notes here. We talked pretty much about most of the cast. Now we're going to talk about. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jonathan Del Ponte. John Del Ponte was pretty much he's a production designer, but he's really just a jack of all trades. He's really an artist when you really break it down. But here's a guy who could pretty much build anything, fix anything, everything from like running the trailers and getting them in position and up and running in the morning to literally designing the sets way in advance. This was, pretty much John's first major production design role. And he worked so hard that, I'm forever indebted to him. I mean, like, the amount of money he was paid compared to the amount of hours he worked, probably get paid about a nickel an hour when you really think all the time that he put in. I definitely could not have done it without him. So John was terrific. And, without that, I mean, look at the sets. That's another thing. I mean, I'm really proud of, if you watch Self Storage, because I just watched it again the other night. It's kind of funny. It was my birthday the other night, and I turned. Thank you. And I remember, I'll always remember Self Storage because it was my birthday on set. It was the only movie I've ever made on either side of the camera where it was my birthday on a day that I'm working, which is always fun. Because as a July birthday, I never got the benefit of like having my birthday in school. I remember jealous of kids that will, we get to stop and have cupcakes for a little, like, and praise this motherfucker. How come I don't get that kind of praise? Because I was born in July. I used to get pissed. I used to get pissed about that.
So backyard Kool-Aid party, yeah.
I always had to have a bullshit summer party, and half the fucking kids are on vacation; they can't even come. But this was a nice time where I get to have that kind of school birthday feel. Everyone's a little nicer to you on your birthday, right? Everyone puts you over a little harder. You're less likely to dunk on someone if it's their birthday, So basically, I'll never forget, like, kind of, looking back at this movie, and looking back, and just like, just a couple nights ago when I watched it, I was like, these sets are really advanced and strong, and we put a lot of fucking effort in. And if you watch this movie, don't get me wrong, this movie has a lot of fucking weak moments, but none of them are ever the production design. Never in the set pieces, never in anything where you're like, oh, that looks like bullshit, or that doesn't look right. The set pieces are all right there, and that's John Del Ponte. So believe it or not, we're on the 45-minute mark on the show, and we still have quite a bit to go. I don't want to break this thing up into a two-parter, but we're going to pick up the pace a little bit. So basically how this all worked was, sometimes when you're location scouting, like the first thing you do when you make a movie, you got to have the location. We got lucky, sometimes you get very lucky. There were a couple of self-storage facilities that I scouted, and pretty much, like, I think the second one, we walked in and it was just like, checked all the boxes. We needed a boat on the facility. I remember the guy was like, "Yeah, we got a boat in the back. Yeah, I got the keys for it." Guy left it here. It's like they were literally getting ready to repossess it. So, like, this storage facility had everything, right down to, like, even like it had, like, remember all the way back to that original self-storage facility that I was looking at in Cranston. It had these, like, iconic, like, orange doors. And this one even had the orange doors. It's amazing the things that you kind of, like, expect to be there in your head and that you just want, like, as an artist. So this thing checked all the boxes. We were able to make a deal with the guy, and we were able to shoot there overnight. And he was very relaxed, very chill. I mean, the nice thing about running a self-storage place is, like, it ain't like we're going to break anything. It's literally just like a bunch of rows and lanes of fucking garages, essentially.
If anything, you're giving him free security for those nights that you were there, because no crooks would be able to come in if a whole film team's there.
Free security. And a quick side note, to this day, I'm pretty sure Verdi Productions has storage space at that storage facility. They use
long-term customer.
We threw them some business. So we rented our facility and we were underway. And really, like, keep in mind, the summertime, people often ask, why do you shoot these movies at night? What's with the overnights? Well, in the summertime, if your movie is scripted to be at night, you don't have a lot of night. Like, if you think about it, like, in the summer, especially around June, July, it's not fully pitch black until 9 o'clock at night. Even around 8:30, you still have some specks of light in the sky. And if you're trying to make it look like the middle of the night, that ain't going to fly. So you really can't get, like, a proper dark, dark, dark night until around 9 p.m. And then, believe it or not, like, right around 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., in one half of the sky starts lighting up quite a bit. You might have a little bit of sky left that you can fuck with, but by 5 a.m., you're fucked. By 5 a.m., it's like all the vampires die and the sun's coming up. So we had a really limited amount of time to shoot this, and it had to be overnight. So when you make an overnight movie, usually shooting splits of, like, we get into work at 5 p.m. and we're leaving at like 5 a.m. One of two things can happen. Almost everybody can go fucking insane because it's very demanding. It's very challenging. Let's face it, our bodies just weren't meant to be up at night. We're not designed that way. It could be a disaster, and everyone can get real cranky, and everyone can be kind of, like, pissy and just not in a good place. Or the latter, which is everybody kind of leans into it, embraces it. It becomes this, like, fucked up summer camp where we're up all night creating art and getting shit done. Self-storage was a lot like that. Self-storage was definitely like, and I think part of that is, and I'm not trying to age shame here because I'm fucking feeling it as I get older. I just had a birthday myself, but we had a very young crew. The average age of this crew was probably 24, 25 years old. So it's like, young, eager, excited. It almost becomes, you almost got to position it like I said, like, this is some kind of crazy movie making party and we're up all night long doing it. And I'll still remember, like, some of the fondest bonding moments was, like, cracking a beer at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, like, as the sun's rising, like, and we're all just kind of bullshitting, talking about the day. And you'd see some guy come in, like, with his kids to, like, open up the self-store, to literally go into a unit. And we'd be all there, like, cracking beers, like, good morning, drinking.
Top of the morning to you.
what the fuck is going on? There's a dozen kids. It was kind of funny. Like we actually used Jake's little like hangout lounge as our little hangout lounge, like in the morning. So double usage there. This was a movie of first times, really across the board. I was a first time director. I was a first time really like playing the lead in a movie. My DP at the time was a guy named Kyle Harrigan. It was his first time. Um, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know what the fuck I was doing. And I was kind of
Right.
learning as I went. And I didn't understand the importance. Like if I could critique myself on, you said, Tommy, what was the biggest mistake you made? Aside from acting in the movie, what was the biggest mistake you made? Not being prepped enough with a shot list. I had no
Okay.
fucking concept of the importance of a shot list. Maybe I'd show up a little bit in the morning and like talk through it with my DP and we'd have a general idea. But like nowadays, and I've talked about this on previous shows, and I'm sure I'll talk about it again, but I have like it's like a methodical approach to like putting together a shot list that I really try to stick to so that there's never any of this. You see a lot of, and if you're listening, I'm just kind of like looking around and I'm confused and okay, I'm going to do this, then I'm going to shoot the close up. Then I'm like, if you're thinking on set, you're fucked. Like you're already fucked. You don't have time for that. Like I said, like the sun's going to come up at 5 a.m. We have no time to be thinking. All we got to be doing is executing the plan. That's all we
Right.
have time for. Yes, you're going to have times when you change things for whatever reason. You're going to encounter obstacles that make you have to think and have to adapt. But let's try to reduce the thinking and increase the execution. And that
Right.
was my problem. I was not reducing the thinking. So by the
No.
end of the shoot, I did kind of figure out, like I remember the last few days of the shoot, better late than never. I remember Mike DP and I did like, okay, let's like really sit down and like talk about the fucking shots we know we need to get. And guys, I know that seems simple, and I know a lot of you might be watching this and saying, you didn't know that you needed a shot list. And it's like, yeah, well, it's fucking overwhelming, man. When you're like getting this movie off the ground, you've got all this shit going on, and you're wearing every fucking hat. It's not that I didn't know it. It's just that I didn't realize the importance of it. I didn't
Right.
realize that like it's literally like driving a car without a fucking steering wheel. It's like, no, you definitely need the steering wheel. We won't be able to turn without that. So a lot of first times, a lot of learning. This was my first time doing stunt work, and I got to work with Nick Principe and see like how that magic works. Um, there was a little bit. We're going to talk about like a couple of I don't want to say, well, some of the negative parts.
Go ahead.
We all know, and I talked about it extensively on the Eric Roberts episode, but I will title this chapter "I'm Not Dying, Boss." And that was basically on the last day of the shoot. Eric Roberts came up to me about an hour before lunch, not even early in the day, about an hour before lunch. We've already shot for 6 hours, 5 hours. Boss, I'm not dying today. And I said, what do you mean? He said, boss, I thought a lot about it, and I'm not dying. And I said, but you're scripted to die at the end of the film. That's kind of the big moment. And then he said, well, you know what? I've been thinking a lot about it. You got a really good movie here. And I think it could have a sequel. And if it has a sequel, you're going to want me in it. And I've died in hundreds of movies, died in over 100 movies probably. I don't live in as many of them. It's more interesting this way. And I'm like thinking, I'm a young director. I don't know my ass from my elbow.
Right.
And I don't understand. There's a great, great 2-letter word that we all have the power to say,
Yeah.
even though we don't always know that we can say it. And do you know what that word is, Mike?
No.
It's fucking no. It's
Yeah.
no. You can say no. And I just didn't know that at the time. I
Right.
didn't know that you could say no. I didn't know that, like, as the director of the film, no one's gonna fire me. No one's gonna get mad at me if I tell the lead actor in my movie, hey man,
Right.
you're scripted to die. You've had this script for a month now. It's always read with you dying at the end. We're an hour away from shooting this and you want to fucking change it now? But of course, first time director and me kind of panders back. I backpedal. And I remember kind of like asking, what to do to my kind of close constituents. And they were all like, everyone's like, I don't know. Do what you want to do. I don't know. And I just felt so much pressure to make Eric happy and to,
Right.
again, keep my lead satisfied. And I said, okay, I'll do it, Eric. But you and me need to spend lunch together. This was me thinking that I got one over on him. You and me need to spend lunch together. We'll go in your trailer and we're gonna kind of sketch out the ending because I don't want us to get on set and not know what the fuck we're doing because
Right.
it's been written like this for over a year.
Yeah.
So I got to figure out a new, as they say in the wrestling business, as in the wrestling business, we need to write a new finish here. We're gonna come up with a new finish because Eric basically did the Hulk Hogan. That doesn't work for me,
Doesn't work
brother.
for me, brother. Yeah.
So now I'm in the trailer. It's lunchtime. And we come up with this fucking nonsense where like I throw a cell phone in the air and he like looks up to catch it. In the process of catching it, I do a John McClane at the end of Die Hard and I have like a gun taped behind my back or some shit and I fucking shoot him. It's fucking dumb. I wasn't happy with it. But again, I'm a 20-something-year-old first-time director, and this Academy Award nominated veteran actor just tells me that he wants to move it. He wants to dance like this. Well, I'm gonna let him lead the dance. And
I was going
unfortunately,
to use the word deference. Like you showed deference and respect to Eric, and I'm sure he meant for the best. And at the time, he probably really did think there was potential for a sequel. So I don't think he was malicious in this, but at the same time, as you said, it's not like he got the script yesterday. He could have made this suggestion or brought it up before, and he kind of put you in a spot there. And I think for me, buddy, if I was in that spot that you were in, my fear would be if I tell him no, he's gonna sandbag the final scene. Now, no offense to
or
Eric Roberts, because he's a great actor, he wouldn't do that, but your fear as a director would be, I'm trying to make this movie, my first movie, get it done, and my lead actor has a different vision for the end scene, and I better go along with what he wants to do because that way he'll act better. That would be my fear.
or you fear that beyond that, maybe he does his job, but then he doesn't promote the movie. Because
Right.
remember, like, part of the job of being an actor is also promoting the film. So, I was afraid a lot. I was afraid of all of those things and more. And ultimately, though, if I could sum it up, and I don't mean to be redundant, but that's just how fucking important this is. I can't say it enough. It's okay to say no, and I just didn't know that I could say no in a creative setting. I thought that like I had to go with whatever these guys told me. So we learn, there's a lot of, we call them teachable moments. Self storage is chuck fucking full of teachable moments. And you know what? If you make your first movie without a bunch of teachable moments, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, that's kind of what you want to do. You want to, you know, you want to make the mistakes in the. This sounds nuts, but like, there's nothing like in-game experience. You can make a million short films till you're blue in the face, but when there's like a financier that put money up and as they say, put their money where their mouth is and said, we are going to make your movie. We're going to put this money in, and you're going to deliver it. The stakes suddenly raise, and it's like that's now you're playing pro ball, kind of like now you're on the fucking real field. This ain't
Right.
the short film where you can shoot it at your leisure and, oh well, we'll get that next weekend, or I'll come back in a month and we'll do it. No, it's like you have only this amount of days, only this amount of time, and if you don't get it, you're done. So like to just have that in-game experience, that's what your first time film is all about. So now I'm going to tell a quick funny story about as we round the show out. I'm going to tell a funny story. I'm going to give a couple of crew shout outs. We're going to do a little bit of a tribute, and then just kind of do a little bit of reflection on it as a whole. But this was the story of the gas station weed. And I'm telling this as a cautionary tale because we got very lucky. I'll be honest with you. Like, this story that you're about to hear could have gotten real ugly. Um, we were obviously smoking weed in this movie, cinematic weed. Now, there are like places where you can get fake stuff to smoke and it's totally safe for your actor. But for whatever reason, we just acquired this gas station weed. I can't call it anything. I wish I could characterize it better than just gas station weed. You've probably all seen it before where you go into the gas station and at the counter by like the candy and the male enhancement pills. It's like candy, male enhancement pills, gas station weed. And it's just like you just see these like cellophane bags of what looks like synthetic weed, and it I guess the kids these days smoke it, and technically it's legal, but it's very fucking bad for you.
Right.
So we have this scene where everybody's like smoking these bongs, and we load it up with the gas station weed. Now I hit it and nothing happened to me. I don't know. Maybe I have a little more experience with feeling in a certain headspace. I don't know.
Sure.
Nothing happened to me. Three of my actors started to literally fucking hallucinate.
Oh God.
And I'm not going to say names because I want to protect the innocent. But I'm talking like screaming, shouting, hallucinations, like had to like monitor them, didn't know what the fuck was going to happen to them.
Oh,
They
gosh.
thought they were having heart attacks. The fucking fire department and the rescue comes. It's that
Oh,
fucking serious because these people are like they're fucking
right.
hallucinating.
Adverse effects.
So here I am, and I'm trying to talk to the rescue guy. This was one night that like Chad wasn't there because he had left. Because keep in mind, it's probably like 3 or 4 in the morning. Probably went home, and I'm like, how the fuck am I going to explain this to Chad? That like the entire set is, or the entire cast, half the cast is hallucinating. Is this shit illegal? Are we going to get in trouble for this? Are the actors going to fucking sue? You know,
Right.
one of these guys is taking an ambulance ride. That's fucking expensive.
Wow.
Like, who's going to pay for that? How does this all work? We have insurance, but I don't know how this all works. So, thank God, by the time the rescue kind of got there and started looking at everyone, most of the cast members had returned to a earthly state, we'll say. But it got scary. So like we only needed to take one person to the hospital and they were fine. It was a precautionary thing. They just wanted to make sure the person wasn't having a fucking heart attack or something. But the next day I definitely got a call from Chad and was like, "What happened on set last night?" And I had to explain that, listen, and this is what I said to the rescue workers too. The good thing, the thing that I had going for me was I was like, look, we smoked this stuff you buy at a gas station. It's literally like, for lack of a better phrasing, over the counter weed. Like
Right.
we didn't do anything nefarious because you can imagine the rescue workers thought like, did you give them PCP? Are you trying to
Right.
drug these kids? Is this funny? Do you think this is like a joke? They thought we literally like hard drugged these motherfuckers.
Right.
But in actuality, it was just this gas station weed had a crazy effect. So the moral of the story is if you're making a movie, really do your extensive research on what to use as synthetic drugs, synthetic whatever. If you're going to snort something up your nose, just make sure it's fucking safe because this could have been a fucking nightmare and we got lucky. And now we look back on it and we all kind of have a laugh. And the gas station weed caused a big fucking debacle. But it could have been bad. Your actors are very fragile. And I don't mean that as I'm not knocking actors. I'm saying like, I mean it like this. If something were to happen to one of those kids, like how
Yeah.
the fuck would we have shot the rest of the movie? Like I can't. Oh, I don't have him back for 2-3 days or whatever.
We,
And,
we
and
we may not be here today, to be honest with you. You dodged a bullet because if
yeah,
it had been,
and real quick, that sounded really insensitive. First and foremost, we would be concerned about the safety of the actor and their health.
yeah,
But I'm just talking from a strictly like, nuts and bolts sense. Like you could really fuck your whole movie up if you don't plan for their health and protection and benefit.
plus your
Um,
career, the,
yeah, and your
your
career.
career, everybody's career. Yeah.
Some quick crew shout outs. Chad Jr., who I work with all the time, and just, Chad Verdi Jr. produced the last movie that I just worked on, The Preacher's Wife, and has produced several movies over the last few years that I've been a part of. And now he's, as they say, he's all grown up. He's a producer himself,
Happily married man. Yes.
family man, and everything else. But back then, he was a 15-year-old PA working hard on the movie sets, and we had a lot of fun together. And Chad and I have always had this kind of brotherly type bond, and this is kind of where it all started on the set of Self Storage. So it's cool to think back. Here we are 10 years later. and now he's producing his own movies. Sam Eilertson, who went on to DP a lot of my movies, and he worked with me on as recent as on Johnny and Clyde. Still a very big collaborator of mine. This was our first project really working together. He was the DIT guy. Chris Brown, who's a gaffer, he worked on this movie, and again, he was literally the gaffer on this movie, Preacher's Wife. Joe Cantor, really great sound engineer. Bobby Boom is a guy who went on to do work the boom mic on several of my films. So this was really like an origin story for me. If you look back, my first 3 or 4 films that I worked on, I should say, a big core of the people came out of this self-storage kind of world.
Didn't Sam also edit?
Yes, that's right. Sam was an editor on the film as well, and that's where we really started to click. And then, of course, Sam went on to DP Army of the Damned, which was his first movie. So you'll notice that this movie has a little pickup day that was shot at the end of the movie. We shot a scene on the water in Bristol, Rhode Island. That was actually my dad's boat. We had to kind of tweak the ending because of the Eric Roberts "I ain't dying today, pal" debacle fiasco. Boss, he calls you boss, but you're not the boss. He's the boss because he ain't dying today. So, looking back on the reaction of this one, I feel like this movie came out, I want to say about a year after we shot it. It came out in 2013 by Screen Media. It was met with some mixed reviews. It did have some solid reviews, though, in the mix. And at the end of the day, I think the most important takeaway or take home, everybody, that's a new phrase that you hear all the time. Like, what was the takeaway on this? And like I said earlier, the takeaway was just proving to Chad, proving to myself, and proving to a lot of the people kind of in this local film scene that I was able to write and direct a movie and kind of shepherd it from start to finish across the finish line and get it made and completed. And I say that a lot to a lot of first-time filmmakers. Again, you ain't trying to just get to the ending. It's not about just trying to shit it out. But the biggest accomplishment behind your first film is essentially just making your first film, having a calling card. And I can't tell you how beneficial having that one movie that I could tell people, people always say, oh, you make movies? What movies have you made? To be able to be like, well, there's this movie Self-Storage. You go on Amazon Prime, you can check it out right now. Suddenly your whole fucking career changes in terms of the perception of other people. And again, we're not living our lives just for what other people think, but you got to fake it till you make it a little bit. This is the entertainment business. There is a little element of smoke and mirrors and presentation into the magic and the art form of it all. So having that first one under your belt is huge. That's what Self-Storage was for me. There was talks of a sequel. I even had it mapped out in my head as to what would happen in the story. But we quickly moved into Army of the Damned, and the sequel kind of just, Self-Storage 2 just died on the vine. But overall, again, this was all about growth and experience and getting that in-game experience where you're working on a budget. And not to sound dramatic, but there is no tomorrow. Meaning we'll just get that shot tomorrow. It's like, nope, we can't get that shot tomorrow because we have to shoot all this shit tomorrow. So if you don't get that shot, it's not in the fucking movie. We got to move on. So
hey, Tommy,
learning how to deal with that.
Speaking of smoke and mirrors, there was a special effects gentleman, Phil Skippy Adams, who worked on this. And unfortunately, Phil Skippy Adams is no longer with us. He was a big force in the New England film scene for decades. And also our buddy Billy V. Vigent, if I said his last name properly, Vigent or Vigent. Billy V was a great guy who passed away after a real fight with cancer. And why don't you say a few words on those gentlemen?
I will. One of the kind of cool things about what we do when we make movies is our work and our efforts are forever ingrained on screen. So it's nice to look back on a movie like this once we know that one of our comrades is no longer with us and see the efforts and the work that they did. It almost becomes a tribute to them that lives on forever. So we dedicate this episode to Billy V and to Phil Skippy Adams. These guys were just great, you know. Like a couple quick things about Skippy. You know, I did have an effects person on. I had Rob Fitz, who was kind of the department head in the effects, and he did like a couple of really big kind of effects for me. Like one in particular was this really cool like knee rip that I talked about earlier, and a bunch of different like big builds that he designed. But like a lot of filmmakers, you know, I had a certain amount of effects, but then I wanted more. I wanted more
Yeah.
blood, more guts. And
Right.
Phil was a guy, or Skippy, how everyone knew him as. Skippy was a guy who basically was like, "Oh man, I can do that too. You know, I can do a bunch of these effects that kind of, as they say, weren't in your budget." And there's one effect in particular that if you watch the movie, at the end of the movie, a guy gets shot in the neck, and it's David Gear, and he sprays blood out of his neck all over the place, and it looks so cool, and he nailed it. And somewhere there's a really great behind the scenes clip that I'm going to try to find, where I'm actually talking about that effect with Skippy. And Skippy was just one of those guys who would listen to you. He would hear your idea, and you know, I've worked with so many artists that when they hear your idea, they'll give you 5 or 6 reasons why they can't do it right off the bat, rather than trying to figure out the 1 or 2 ways and how you can actually fucking do it. And
Yeah.
Skippy was one of those guys who, if you gave him an idea, he would never. First reaction was never the, well, we can't do that because of this. We can't do that because I can't do. How am I going to do? It was, okay. Well, if I run a tube up here and I do this and I shoot the blood from a pump, he was just a guy who could get shit done. So we appreciate that, and I'll never forget. Last thing about Skippy, he would always wear Chuck Taylor Converse shoes with specks of blood on the white part where the toes go, and he would love it because he would fuck with people like when he was like out in public, or like he'd say like, you should see me going into an airport with these things on, you know, like it looked like he just murdered someone if you look at his shoes. So that was the one kind of funny thing. He had a really fun like dark side to him. And then of course Billy V, who was just not only a great character actor who had an awesome presence on screen, but also just like a guy who would cheer for you and get in your corner. And I'll never forget, you know, I don't want to get into too much detail because I'll probably get a horse head in my bed in the morning, like in The Godfather. But there were some like potential issues with the unions on this movie. And, you know, they weren't giving us any shit or anything, but they just wanted to like know what we were doing. The reality is the movie was way too small to be any kind of a union movie. It was a tiny budget. You know, they kind of just were sniffing around a little bit. And I remember it was Billy V who, oh man, how can I say this without
Want to
incriminating
talk to
myself?
somebody?
Had some political connections potentially,
Yeah.
where I remember him just calling me one day and being like, "Don't worry, Tommy, you're not going to have a problem." And I'm actually going to be there on set for like a couple days. And I remember like the first few days, like Billy V wasn't working on the movie, but he was just hanging out. You know, Billy V at the time, you got to know Billy V too, is, you know, probably stood at about 6'2", 6'3", and you know, we're talking all of 275 rugged pounds, muscular, big, tough, full-grown man, as they say.
Right.
So I remember Billy V would show up in his New York Giants cutoff T-shirt with his big arms out and gold chains, smoking a cigar, and just kind of hanging out, making sure everything's cool on set. So shout out to Billy V for being there for me. And Billy V also has a great scene at the end. It's kind of funny. I remember, this is another little filmmaking thing, but Billy V gets shot at the end of this movie, and he's laying on the ground, and I'll never forget the fucking exhaust to the car. We left the car running, and like
Mm.
again, movie stuff, we never should have had the car running for a number of reasons. I mean, someone could have accidentally kicked it into fucking reverse, and Billy V would have gotten fucking ran over. So like, it's just a bunch of young guys and girls making a movie that just weren't fucking thinking. But this wasn't even about that. Poor Billy V is down laying on the ground, and the fucking exhaust is just kicking into his face, and it's
Oof.
just like the exhaust is just pumping out him, and he's trying to stay dead. And then
Right.
like cut, and he goes, "Cuz, I almost died for real. You're pumping this carbon monoxide into my face." And it was just like a funny moment. He was obviously playful about it, but it was fucking hilarious. And I remember going up to John Del Ponte, me and him laugh about everything. He was like, "You almost fucking asphyxiated Billy V during that last fucking scene." So Billy would have a laugh about that one. So shout out to Billy, shout out to Skippy. Your work will live forever, and it's fun that we can talk about it today, 10 years later. But again, biggest takeaway, if you're a filmmaker out there and you got a script, believe in it, don't give up. And even if you think it's a little bit over your head, sometimes in life it's okay to bite off a little more than you can chew and make a name for yourself as a person who is going to jump at opportunities. Because there's nothing worse than when an opportunity presents you and you kind of you hesitate, you're pensive. People can see that shit and they smell it from a mile away. But if you see the opportunity, and even if you're a little afraid, even if you're a little nervous, fucking strike at it and get it. And that's kind of what we did on self-storage. So you can watch that one back, check it out. I think you can get it on, I think it's out there on Amazon Prime. We would love to hear your thoughts on it. Don't forget, if you can find Thea Trinidad in this movie and send me a screenshot, I will send you an autographed piece of self-storage memorabilia. And real quick, Mike, let's talk about next week. I think next week, we had such great feedback on worst days in the movie business. I think I'd like to try to be a little more positive as we enter the rest of our summer, and maybe we'll talk about our best days on a movie set. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sounds good to me. I like that, and we'll do it. Yeah,
we're gonna flip the script, and we're talking about something positive next week.
Positive
days, our best days on set, and not only that. Listen, we're not just gonna tell bullshit stories about our best days, but we're also gonna talk about what we learned from our best days.
Yeah.
Let's go through our comments here.
Anthony just chimed in.
Anthony Figueroa, Ant, I found some really great pictures of us from self-storage. Ant is a guy who kind of does it all. He's a director, he's a cinematographer. We had a great time in that movie, and I'll never forget a famous foot race that took place. Kind of became like a little bit of a tradition where Ant and John Del Ponte would actually race each other at the end of the night, which was actually the morning. And this one particular time, I think it was like, from one end of the trailer to the other end of the trailer. And I got to say, it wasn't even close. And Ant, he smoked him. So that was a fun memory. Fun working with you on that one, Ant. And I got to send you these pictures. Fun times. I mean, that's the thing, man. I can't say it enough, but like, time goes by, and you always have these memories, and you can always kind of look back and reflect on them. So we appreciate that stuff, and thank you for checking in on us all. Stephen E, be careful with that gas station weed, buddy. Seriously, it'll play with more than you know.
Okay.
You might just.
Stephen E had a question for Anthony, believe it or not.
Figueroa, did you create a film with a guy named Tony Wolf? He very well may have. Ant is doing a lot of work out in Los Angeles right now. You two should link up. Good people. We love trying to build a community here on End Action and getting as many of our film friends together as we can. So thanks for checking in. Thanks for watching. And check us out next week. I think we're going to be back on our regular day, Tuesday next week, to talk about our best days on set ever.
Best days.
Later, guys.
Thanks.